all over the news everywhere. We're all hearing about the one big beautiful bill, and there's a lot of questions. And and I know I've reached out to you about a bunch of things, like pass through tax credit and stuff like that, and you've been incredibly helpful. Thank you. Um, what what can you share now, as like you've worked through this thing getting signed on the 4th of July?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in there, and it is so important to take advantage of the tax code. And that's one of the reasons we're such big advocates of practice ownership at some point. Some of you listening to this may not want to do that, but you got to know like maybe what tax opportunities you're leaving on the table by being a W-2 employee. You just have to understand that so you can take that into your career planning. And so even if you can't earn more money, let's just say your income stayed the same. If you can keep more of what you're earning and keep more in your pocket to go towards wealth building, it's a win-win, right? And so the biggest items is the tax bill that was just passed is essentially extending most of the tax code that was implemented in 2017. And so I want to just recap some of those things that are the main uh, drivers for tax savings for dentists, and give you a little bit of recap on that. First is the qualified business income deduction. The tax code incentivizes the business owner. Essentially, there's a deduction that gives you a 20% deduction on your business income, right? And so this is to incentivize business ownership in our country. And you can make $100,000 of business income with this deduction. It's called the qualified business income deduction. If you have $100,000 of business income, you get a $20,000 write-off on that business income. So just by being a business owner, you get a $20,000 write-off, and essentially you're only being taxed on 80% of your income. So now instead of being taxed on 100K, you're being taxed on 80K. So that same income, you could work as a W-2 employee for that same practice. Now you're paying income taxes on the whole $100,000, right? So that's the qualified business income deduction. The issue, though, is most doctors are S corporations, and so they have to pay their like a portion of their business income out to themselves as salary. So you might have a doctor that's making $300,000 a year in profit. They may pay themselves $200,000 of salary in W-2 wages to themselves from their corp. So once you pay that $200,000 salary out, now there's only $100,000 worth of profit left over. That's the part that's going to be eligible for that 20% qualified business income deduction. So that's huge. The nuances of that one is that deduction, like many of the deductions that are available, phases out once your income hits $300,000. It starts to phase out $300,000 of income married filing jointly. And so that's where we have to utilize those retirement plans. Like if you're hovering at 350,000 of income, right? We're always looking at like, is there something we can do to drive income down to make you eligible? Um, Not all businesses are subject to those income limits, but doctors are. Service professionals have that cap on income to be able to get that deduction. So you being a doctor, right, you've got to deal with those income phase outs. And so it's super important to plan around those. And if you're hovering around that $300,000 of income limit, what can we do to get you below that? The next huge thing with this bill is bonus depreciation. So bonus depreciation allows you to accelerate write-offs on stuff that you buy, such as equipment, practice purchases, real estate. The default write-off for a piece of equipment is 5 years. And so the way it used to be is like you would, so before this bill was passed, I guess, the bonus depreciation was going away. And so you would write off, like if you bought a practice, you would write off the equipment and the fixtures and that kind of thing off over 5 years. Now you have the option and ability to write it off all up front. So a huge planning opportunity because you might be able to take a massive write-off, like I said, when you buy a practice, drive your income way down, and then maybe that will create a scenario for you to do Roth conversions or fund a Roth 401k and fund those at low tax rates in post-tax dollars. So that could be huge for you. The bonus depreciation is also huge if you want to do a startup practice. If you build a startup, you got that entire build out practice essentially, or the entire build out, which is probably going to be around $700,000 plus. Now you can accelerate the bulk of that in write off up front. So I had a client who did a build out on a practice last year, and he essentially isn't paying taxes for several years now. Well, now that we plan it out, now that we've got this bonus depreciation, he'll be able to offset his income for several years worth of
Nice.
earnings, just because of that bonus depreciation that's available. The SALT cap is huge. The SALT deduction is your state and local income taxes. Okay. And so before this bill was passed, you had a cap on what you could deduct in state taxes and real estate taxes, and the cap was $10,000. And so with this final bill that was just recently passed, they increased that cap from $10,000 up to $40,000 for individuals. The caveat there is you have to have $500,000 of AGI or less. And so if you've got a high earning spouse, and you're a high earner, right? You may want to look for utilizing those retirement plan vehicles, maxing those out. Can you drive your income down below that $500,000 of AGI so that you don't waste this deduction, right? And so super important to know where you're at against those phase outs. If your income is less than $500,000, not a huge deal. Now you get $40,000 write-off. So, if you make $200,000, your state taxes, you might be paying, $15,000 or so in state taxes. Now you get to write that off on your tax return, where before it would have been capped at 10K.
And that's a really big deal in states like California, right, that have higher state and local taxes, right?
Yeah, like the California rate is 9.3%, right? And so if you're taking 9.3% of your income and paying that in taxes, that adds up fast. And then your real estate taxes are really high in states like California.
Mhm.
You're paying like 1% of your property value. So if you have $1 million property and you're paying $10,000 in real estate taxes, like before you weren't being able to get a write-off for that. Now you do. So that one is really huge, I think, for our client base, especially here in California. The one thing that the House was trying to eliminate, and we could actually give a lot of credit to to the ADA and the CDA. I think there was a lot of lobbying here going on, and a lot of people wrote letters to senators. And I want to give a round of applause to the ADA and CDA for getting out in front of this. The House bill that was originally proposed was not going to allow you to have pass-through entity tax. And that's a new term here for some of you, I'm assuming. The pass-through entity tax allowed you to pay your personal state tax on your business income. It allowed you to pay that through your business as a business expense. So going back, you have a practice or you're an associate as a 1099 and you've got $100,000 of profit, you could elect to pay the $9,300 of state taxes, 9.3% of your profit, through your business as a business write-off. If you didn't do that, it wasn't required. If you didn't want to do that, you would just pay that $9,300 as tax with your personal tax return and not get a write-off for it. So they created that loophole called the pass-through entity tax that allowed you to pay the state taxes associated to your business income as a business write-off. And they were going to cut that loophole in the House bill. And then all of a sudden, the ADA and the CDA were saying, "Hey, go write your senator. This is going to be a huge loss for doctors." And I think there was a lot of noise. And in the final bill that was passed, they actually took away the limitations on the pass-through entity tax. And so that's pretty significant because now you got a $40,000 cap on your salt tax. It went up 30 grand on what you can deduct. And on top of that, you still get to do the pass-through entity tax deduction if you have business income. That's not available for sole props. That's available for pass-through entities, so partnerships and S corporations. So I wanted to give a recap on that because that just kind of shows how if you are going to have business income, you can really move the needle in taxes and what you keep in your pocket. And so we have a slide in our deck that we use that says, hey, if you can save $20,000 of taxes a year and invest it all over 30 years, that can grow to $3 million, right? And so it is achievable to save $20,000 on taxes, but not if you're a W-2 employee, right? And so just keep that in mind when you're trying to plan your career. How much money are you going to pay in taxes? Honestly, it's probably, when you're looking at budgeting, probably one of the biggest expenses you'll ever have is the tax bill, and you got to pay that every year. So let's do some damage on that and plan the best we can to take advantage of the tax code.